Yo, it's your boy Jacob. We're here going over something that I find deeply concerning. This is 2025 Minnesota Statute 609.748 Harassment Restraining Order. Subdivision 1 gives you the definition. Harassment includes a single incident of physical or sexual assault, a single incident of harassment under Section 609.749, which I believe is the criminal law, a single incident of non-consensual sharing of a private sexual image under Section 617.261, or repeated incidents of intrusive or unwanted acts, words, or gestures that have a substantial adverse effect or are intended to have a substantial adverse effect on the safety, security, or privacy of another, regardless of the relationship between the actor and intended target. Now, before we go further into this, I do want to remind everyone I'm not a lawyer, but I'm planning on becoming one. And I've had experiences with this statute, both having it abused against me and getting orders against people who were extorting me. So there are other incidents here, but I'm not going to go over everything. You can Google this, find it yourself, look up your own local state laws if you live in a different state. Obviously, it's a state-by-state matter, and they're not all going to be the same. But the general concern that I'm bringing up here, I think, carries over between most states. So, jurisdiction, not a big deal. Contents of petition. This is important. A petition for relief must allege facts sufficient to show the following: name of victim, name of respondent, the respondent has engaged in harassment. This is important because, when you're signing this petition, you are signing that everything you're submitting is factual and true. So I'm going to try to break this up into a few parts, maybe around 6 parts. And part 1 here is what is the restraining order, which is why I'm kind of going over this. Another important thing is the filing fees. You can waive the filing fees if you are in some level of poverty or indigent, in other words. You can also be granted a temporary restraining order against the respondent. An ex parte order is what they call it, which will still have the same effect as a finalized restraining order down here, which means that if you violate it, you will be hit with actual criminal charges and other penalties like fines. So there's a lot of issues here, but that is part 1, what is a restraining order, and the definitions. Part 2 is how to get one, and this is kind of where I dive into some of the issues I have with this. Again, we kind of went over this. You have to be a victim of harassment. You have to allege these incidences have occurred either 1 or 2 or more times. And it's really easy. It's almost too easy. For example, in my state, here's the form HAR 102. You can just go over this really quick and see how simple it really is. The form does try to make it as easy as possible, and I commend them for that, because I'm sure the courts see a lot of this. These are a very common thing in the legal system here in Minnesota, from what I've been told. So that is that, 10 pages. There's a lot of things from attending public events to targeted picketing, using personal information without consent, sharing private sexual images or other images, stolen property, damaged property, breaking and entering, frightening, threatening behavior, which is very vague, threats to the victim, harassing phone calls or text messages, uninvited visits to the victims, followed, monitored, pursued, physical, sexual assault, even online behavior. It constitutes harassment. So It's really easy to get one. You fill out this petition, and then again, you can have a fee waiver, which I didn't include on here, but that's easy enough to look up yourself. And then the other thing I'll go over is requesting for a hearing in a different part. So again, that's how you kind of get one. You fill that out, you make your allegations. Now part 3, I kind of want to go over the consequences here. Again, violation of restraining order subdivision 6. Violation of the order is a misdemeanor. A person is guilty of a gross misdemeanor who violates the order within 10 years of a previous qualified domestic violence related offense. So that's kind of a heightened thing for domestic violence. Felony, sentenced to imprisonment for not more than 5 years or up to a $10,000 fine if they do these 6 things. There's just a lot here. So I'm not going to go over all of it. Again, I have a bigger point to all of this that I want to cover. So part 4 is defending against one. And this is where, if you are served with one, where you are the respondent here, you would want to fill out a request for hearing. I believe you have to do so within 20 days of service of the petition. It's 1 page. This is very important. And that will allow you to have a court date where you will have an evidentiary hearing where you'll be able to say your side of everything to the judge, and hopefully you have a good judge. Otherwise, you might want to hire an attorney. I cannot stress that enough. So part 5. Why is this flawed and extremely easy to abuse? Well, let me tell you, it is extremely easy to abuse. It is extremely flawed because, once again, in this form, you are certifying under penalty of perjury that everything I have stated in this document is true and correct. MinStat 358116. Now, what does that mean, and why is it dangerous for people who might be on the other end of a frivolous or maliciously filed restraining order? Because in all of these lines here, someone could make things up and bring false allegations to the table. You could, in theory, say, someone I don't like has stolen from me, took pictures of me, threatened to kill me, and since the judge has to take everything at face value as the truth, whoever you don't like, even your competing business that might be more superior than yours, that you're trying to take out of the way, right? They'll be served and probably given a temporary restraining order against them. These restraining orders are typically rubber stamped by judges who are overworked and underpaid. They see so many of them that if they see even an inkling of what could be legitimate harassment, they're just going to sign off on it without doing any form of research into the background of either party. Again, you can literally say whatever you want in the petition, and the judge has to take it at face value. The majority of people don't have the time or money or knowledge to really defend against a frivolous or malicious restraining order, and even having an attorney isn't going to guarantee you're safe from a frivolous restraining order, because guess what? You can lie under oath in court. You know, your testimony is considered an exhibit, and the judge is going to have to take it as factually. So a lot of this can be used by abusers to attack enemies, opponents, competition, competing businesses, and just in general anyone they don't like. And then if they get granted an ex parte order, they could go to the news with it to further their harassment of the real victim, attack them politically, attack their business, etc. You name it. The repercussions and ramifications of a frivolous, malicious restraining order against you is pretty grim to think about here. And the other real big problem here is the general public doesn't know much about these restraining orders or how they work. You know, if an abuser gets a frivolous restraining order against you, and then they start posting about it saying, oh, I got this new ex parte order against this person, the general public's going to assume that that person, you, the real victim, is some villain, some bad person, without even realizing that you were slapped with this temporary restraining order, this ex parte order, without even a proper hearing. So, let's backtrack again. What do you do if you're on the other end? Again, you fill out your request for a hearing within 20 days. Document everything you can, and I cannot stress this enough, find an attorney if you can. There are legal aid options for people who have lower income, I'll put it that way. Ultimately, you're going to want to pray you get a good judge. And again, the other party can lie under oath. And you need to be able to either disprove their lies factually, outright, in court, or be prepared for it to be accepted as a fact by the judge. And sometimes it's not going to go your way. Now, the reality is, for other repercussions, or lack of, is if you do prove that someone brought a frivolous restraining order against you, you're probably not going to recover any legal fees. They're probably not going to be perjured and hit with a charge for lying under oath. And they're probably not going to be reprimanded in any other way, because from what I've learned, courts really like to err on the side of caution here and not ever be seen to maybe make it harder for a potential victim to bring another HRO against their potential abuser, even if that person is proven to be a frivolous filer, a vexatious litigant. Now, other states may have different outcomes for this. I'm just talking about Minnesota, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a man trying to raise awareness for what has become a very, very horrible loophole in our legal system that abusers like to use to silence their actual victims. So one good tool is to know the phrase DARVO: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Wikipedia says DARVO is a reaction that perpetrators of wrongdoing, such as abusers or sex offenders, may display in response to being held accountable for their behavior. Research indicates that it is a common manipulation strategy of psychological abusers. So, the perpetrator denies the harm or abuse ever took place. When confronted with evidence, the perpetrator then attacks the person that they harmed or are still harming. The attacker may also attack the victim's family or friends. Third, finally, the perpetrator claims that they were or are actually the victim in the situation, thus reversing the positions of victim and offender. It often involves not just playing the victim, but also victim blaming. This stuff is very important. I'm not going to go over all of it, but I recommend educating yourself if you're ever in this position and writing to your legislator and seeing if they can add better language or encourage our judicial branch to create some form of repercussions for people who make frivolous filings, or make it easier for them to be dismissed. Ultimately, so many people's lives get ruined because people learn how to abuse what was originally supposed to be a law that helps people. It's just a shame. People shouldn't be living in fear. It needs to be harder for abusers to DARVO their victims. It needs to be harder. If you have any ideas, let me know. If you've lived through this, I'd love to hear your story. if you're willing to share it. Thank you for the time, and please let me know if there's anything else I can do. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just me raising awareness about a really important issue in my life. And hopefully this leads to some good. If not, what was it for? Again, hopefully just to help someone. I don't know. There's not much else to say here. It's a very depressing topic. It's a very hard topic to talk about. And it impacts so many good people every day. Thank you so much for your time. Like, share, and sub. Peace.